Hello everyone, welcome back. In this session, I will talk about strategies for privatization and Korea's experience in the privatization process. I'll skip the introduction of myself. These are the contents of this session. Okay. Well, in general, the government reform has two different strategies. First, reform from outside and voluntary reform. This outside does not necessarily mean the foreign, but this outside means outside of your own organization. Somebody else outside of your organization tells you what to reform for your organization. That's reform from outside. Okay? Well, there are positive aspects and negative aspects of each reform. First of all, reform from outside is more useful for fundamental reform because nobody wants to fundamentally reform yourself. So voluntary reform will not change much about yourself. However, since it is done by you, once it is planned and determined, the feasibility is higher. However, reform from outside reformer may create a lot of resistance. There is a Korean saying that a Buddhist monk cannot have his hair cut with his own hands. That means you cannot solve your own problem. We need barber, who will take care of your own problem. So that is absolutely true for the reform in the country, state level. So privatization is a very fundamental reform. So in order to achieve the privatization of SOE, you need to have an outside reformer. You cannot just let each line ministry privatize their own SOE. They will never privatize their own SOEs. Okay. So the privatization process is very important, and strategies are very important. And there are three major components of strategies: reform driver, and stakeholder, and the process. I will talk about these three components one by one in order to successfully implement privatization reform. What kind of strategies should be taken? The first reform driver is, of course, political leadership, the president of a country or prime minister of a country. Okay. Since privatization incurs a lot of resistance, the plan should be made and implemented in the early period of presidency. In the later part of the presidency, he or she might lose his power going through a lame duck period. So the draft plan should be made very early period of presidency. The legislature in general very skeptical about the privatization. So do not talk with them until you have a full completed draft plan. Okay. And organize consumer group who can benefit from privatization. When you try to privatize SOE, you will hear all resistance. There will be no friends who will support your privatization plan. Okay? Try to find a consumer group who will benefit from the privatization and let them support your drive. And in order to get a public support, you'll have to make your people angry about your SOE. So utilize prosecutor's office, CIA, or audit office so that they can talk about the problems and corruptive actions of those SOEs. And that will make your public angry about SOE, and that will be your driving force for privatization. And of course, from the political leader's point of view, nominating reformative figure to the head of a reform driving organization, in this case, privatization driving organization, is essential step. Next is the reform organization who will lead this privatization process. Ministry of Finance in general is not a bad reformer compared to line ministry. They are in fact much better reformer compared to the line ministry. However, in many cases, Ministry of Finance is also in charge of national asset. So privatization, in a way, means loss of national asset from Ministry of Finance's point of view. So you should give a proper incentive to Ministry of Finance so that they can be motivated to privatize SOE. Okay? Examples will be higher position in line ministries relevant to privatization. These motivations should be given to MOF. And it is often important to create a commission whose mission is privatization. This commission should be composed of Ministry of Finance and the relevant line ministries and the experts in the private sector. Okay? And the secretariat of this commission should be independent from Ministry of Finance, because privatization process is different from managing SOEs. Okay? And on the other hand, the following two driving forces will not be a good option for the driver of privatization. One bad case is permanent government body whose mission is managing SOE. When their mission is managing SOE, they don't want to privatize SOE, because when they privatize all SOE, there is nothing for them to do. There is no job left for them. So they will be very, very slow in the privatization process. And in the same way, a permanent government body whose sole mission is privatization is again a bad option as a driver for privatization. Because if their sole mission is privatization, when privatization process is completed, there is no job left for them either. So they may slow down the process of privatization. Okay? So the commission that I just mentioned is better to be a temporary organization rather than permanent government body. As a stakeholder, line ministry is very important. The reformer should get on consensus with the line ministry, because they are the one who can stop this process utilizing the politicians. Line ministries have a power to persuade politicians. There are many cases that a privatization plan established in the administration, executive body, is rejected by the parliament. And in many cases, in the back of the parliament, the line ministries are supporting these politicians' efforts to stop this privatization process. And also, this line ministry is the one who will have to implement the privatization process. So if you do not get on the same boat with this line ministry, it will be very hard to arrive at the final destination of privatization, because they will have to row the boat towards the privatization goal. Okay? But you will have to also make some motivation for line ministry. State-owned enterprise is like their children. They don't want to lose their children by privatizing them. So you will have to give a proper motivation for them, including more divisions in ministry after privatization. Well, after privatizing your SOE, some policy function, which used to be in the state-owned enterprise, should be transferred to line ministry. And you will probably need more divisions anyway. Second, you will need a regulatory body governing the price scheme in a new privatized the market situation. And then you can make this regulatory body placed under the control of the line ministry. Okay? And of course, the biggest concern for line ministry is the loss of job opportunity after retirement. Okay? And this is not as easy to do that, but it's better to find a way to mitigate this problem. Okay? So these are the ways to reduce the resistance of line ministry. And try not to monopolize the reform credit, but share it with the line ministry. The privatization driver tends to enjoy the credit of privatization by itself, but you will have to share that credit with the line ministry. Without it, line ministries will not be cooperative. But you may find that line ministry is not very cooperative with you. In that case, you may have to report to the president about their resistance. In this respect, the strong political support of the president is very, very important. So this whole process of privatization cannot be achieved at all without the strong political support. So try to make sure that you will get all the support from your president. And next stakeholder is public opinion. There are some worries among the public concerning the privatization. Number one is foreign capital's dominance. When there is not much of a capital within your country, foreign capital will buy your SOE. Is it a big problem in your country? Well, it may be the case. I don't want you to sell your SOE to foreign capital with cheap price. Okay? At least you will have to make a joint venture so that you can learn from your foreign capital. Okay? Try not to sell your foreign capital, your SOEs directly to foreign capital. In that case, you will lose a chance to learn from your foreign capital. So at least try to have a joint venture with your foreign capital. Okay? So you tell the public, tell your citizen that you will not sell your SOE directly to the foreign capital. You will tell your audience, the citizens, that you will have a investment partnership with foreign capital. And another worries is the imbalance between the small and medium-sized enterprise with the big conglomerates. That was the big concern in Korea. And that's why in Korea, the big conglomerates were not invited to the SOE sales market. Samsung, Hyundai, LG, SK, especially after 1990s, they were not invited to buy SOEs. Because Korea's economy was dominated by this chaebol and the big conglomerates already, people didn't want to enforce this economic imbalance between big firms and small and medium-sized enterprise. However, if you exclude the big companies from this privatization process, who will be able to buy your SOE in your country? If it is not the foreign capital, if it is not your big company, who will be able to buy your SOE in your country? So I think that this domestic big company will not be excluded from this privatization market. You will have to invite them. If you are still worried about this problem, then you can introduce a single owner, but with the, say, 55% and 45% of share SOE share can be distributed to the rest of the general public. So it's a mixture of single ownership plus partial mass privatization. And let the new owner of the privatized SOE do something good for the people. So public support is very important because your political support, your president, comes from the public opinion. Third, maybe this is the biggest worries among the citizens. Will price go up after privatization or not? Well, to tell you the truth, if the price has to go up, it will have to go up. Because if price is kept too low, it will create a lot of deficit for the SOE, not only for the SOE, but also for privatized company. And it will create a huge burden for your economy in the long run. So having a right price is important. However, people will be very upset about the price increase right after the privatization. So when there's a need for increase in the rate, wait until this whole privatization process is over, and you will have to, make some time before you increase the price level to the right level. Sometimes you will have to use public money for a while in order to subsidize the price. If price should not go up right after the privatization. And try to create a quick tangible effect and try to share it with the public. In many cases, privatized company has increasing profits, and their market value in the stock market increased dramatically. That was the case in Korea. So that is the easiest way to share the fruits of privatization with the public. Public as a shareholder, they will enjoy the increase of the market value in the stock market of the privatized company. Well, next is about reform process. Okay? Reform starts with this trigger. How can we trigger a privatization? Well, as I mentioned previously, it's better to create a sense of crisis or sometimes public anger among people regarding SOEs. The most successful privatization drive in Korea was made possible by economic crisis in 1997. So a year later, Korea launched a massive and drastic privatization plan, and that was made possible by the economic crisis. And this sense of crisis touched off strong support of the public towards privatization. Take advantage of your crisis. Crisis is a blessing in disguise. You will have to implement important reform measures when you face an economic crisis. If you don't have such crisis, as I mentioned, you will have to make your people angry about your SOE. Report to your public about the inefficiencies and corruptive actions of your SOEs. And people will feel the need of privatization by those in the news. And again, you start a comparative study on SOE in selective countries and show the public about the different performance of different SOE in different countries. Some country shows much better performance, some countries don't, and people will realize the need of privatization when they face this research result. And when you have some SOE to be privatized in your mind, do not target only those SOE, but try to, try to reform all SOE at the same time. If you focus only one or two SOE, they will say, why only me? Okay? It will create a lot of resistance from them. So do not target only one or two. Try to target all at the SOEs at the same time. So privatization drive should be very massive all across the board. And privatize subsidiaries first. Many SOE have their own subsidiary. In Korean case, sometimes the number of subsidiary companies outnumber 20, sometimes 30. Okay? SOE tend to make a lot of subsidiary companies under their control. So you can privatize those subsidiary first. It's much easier, and it will give people chance to understand the benefit of privatization. And it's better to give a certain performance target for each state-owned enterprise. And when they cannot meet the goal or the target, tell them that you will privatize those SOE. Okay? And if they cannot meet those targets, they will be under the privatization plan. And if they meet the target, well, that's good. Their performance has been improved. So the government will not lose anything. Well, that's why many Korean SOEs are performing very efficiently. This is Incheon International Airport, the gate airport in Korea. They recorded the best service airport 12 years in a row in the world competition. Can you imagine that? 12 years in a row, the number one in the world. And this is Korail, Korea's railroad corporation. They shows one of the world's highest on-time arrival rate. In Korea, if a train late 5 minutes, they feel sorry about it. It's a very rare case that they arrive 5 minutes later than the scheduled time. Well, I don't think they are very, very efficient as the private sector, but compared to other SOEs in other countries, Korea's SOE are performing very well. They are under the pressure of privatization now. Government thinks that if their performance is not good, they will have to be privatized. So this is there is a constant pressure on them. Okay. And next reform process is making a draft plan. Okay. When you make a draft plan, try to prepare the most aggressive one at the beginning, because you will have to give away to the stakeholders a little bit. So your plan targets this 100%. As time goes by, through the negotiation, after the negotiation, the level of privatization goes down and down, little by little. So your original plan will be mitigated in the process. So try to have a most aggressive plan at the beginning before you negotiate with stakeholders. Okay? Utilize the ideas of private sector and of the academia. Private sector will be very happy about this privatization process. Okay? Get a report from them. However, it has to be confidential, because many private companies are afraid of SOEs, and people might get suspicious about this relation between government and the private sector. However, listen to the private sector. Their voice is very important. And also, of course, academia is an important source of knowledge and information backing up your privatization plan. And that was the case in Korea. The KDI, where I'm working for, has helped the government when they initiate privatization plan, especially after the economic crisis in 1997. And when you draft the privatization plan, let SOE submit reasons why they should not be privatized. They will give you many reasons why they should not be privatized, and you have to prepare a logic attacking all those logics provided by SOE. Okay? And consider privatization of SOE function by function. When you cannot privatize the SOE as a whole, you can privatize their function. Okay? Some of the function is easier to be privatized. Okay? So try not to privatize the SOE as a whole. Sometimes it is possible, but sometimes it is not possible. Okay? In that case, you separate SOE and privatize one by one. Okay? The final plan should not be overly ambitious. If you make, well, it's good to start from very aggressive plan, but your final plan should not be overly ambitious. If it is overly ambitious, it will be stopped sometime in the future. Maybe your politics, or maybe your next president. So too ambitious plan is supposed to be stopped sometime in the future. That has been the experience of Korea. And reform process, the final reform process is implementation. Okay? Establish a driving force in each line ministry. Although the reform driver makes a draft plan and finalize the plan itself, it is the line ministry who will carry out the reform process. Okay? And let them accountable to reform driver and provide incentive to them. Okay? And when you do that, you have to define the process and deadline. Give a specific deadline for each action to the line ministry. After you come to an agreement about the privatization plan, you should give a monthly plan. Until this month, you have to do this. The next month, this is your job. And the next month, this is your job. The monthly plan should be given to each line ministry. Okay? Check up on their progress regularly. And have a joint press release with the line ministry. Okay? Maybe every month or every other month. It is a very good way of checking upon the line ministry's commitment. When they announce in public the progress, line ministry will have to exert themselves, try to meet the target every time. And privatization process should not be completed. Should be completed within the current presidency. You don't know what will happen under the next president. That has happened in Korea. And President Roh nullified the privatization plan of many SOEs, which was finalized by his predecessor, President Kim. So it's better to complete the privatization process within the current president's term. Finally, specify the privatization method and deadline in the law. When you feel that this privatization process takes a long time, if it takes a long time, you don't know what will happen in the future. So make it clear in the law. Then your plan will be sustainable, even under the new president. Okay? So this is how you handle all the risk and challenges of privatization. Okay? Let's have a break before we move on to the Korean experience. Thank you.